A Michigan teenager is now fighting for her life after contracting toxic shock syndrome. The 15-year-old became violently ill after using tampons for the very first time. Here with me to talk about toxic shock is Dr. McCaffrey with the McCaffrey Family Health Center. Doc, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. So, 15-year-old Riley Whitten is still on life support, but everyone thought she had the flu. What are some of the symptoms of toxic shock?
You know, and you said it exactly, the flu. It comes across exactly like that. You can get a fever, a pretty good one, 102, 103 type fever, nausea, fatigue, tiredness, just everything you would think of that you get with a bad flu. So it's hard sometimes to pick them apart. That's where you have to do a little bit more research.
Yeah, evidently the flu and meningitis were ruled out, but it was, I guess, through a blood test that they found out it was actually toxic shock.
Yeah, and that would be using a streptococcus bacteria that's getting in there, or it can be a staph infection. Either one of the two can cause it. And what happens when you look at toxic shock, because it's linked to tampons, feminine hygiene, the problem that we have is that when those products were originally invented, they were all cotton. And it was cotton that wasn't, bleached and processed and all these things, and it was pretty natural for, the words that we're looking at. And so then they got into that. Well, as time went on in the 60s, they decided, hey, we can use rayon in there. And we can use other things. And now you'll even see like a wood pulp type material put in there because it's very absorbent. The problem with that is that when these things come on board, you're going into an environment that is very warm. It's 100 degrees or more. It's really absorbent in their nature, so that they leave little filaments behind. So you get little pieces of rayon and stuff that stick behind, and all of a sudden these bacteria that are naturally in that environment, now they have something to grow on and really get going.
Yeah, and how important is time and early diagnosis? Because for Riley, she had been sick for a couple days and it just got worse and worse and worse.
Well, and again, the problem that we're learning now, when you look at the vaginal area in a female, that they can absorb things very quickly through there, and they're looking at even medications now and doing it that way because it absorbs at a much higher rate than taking the medication orally. And what happens then is that if that absorbs very quickly like that and it's a bacteria, you scrape the lining, you allow it a way into the body, and it just rushes in. Well, time's of the essence at that point, and you start thinking, okay, is it a flu, is it a fever? And that's what the doctor had to kind of diagnose from a lot.
Yeah, and toxic shock has been around for decades. So why is this the last thing we think of when a girl or woman becomes ill like this?
Because the incidence of it, it's not as common. You're looking at, I think, 1 to 2 cases per every 100,000 females. And you look at flu and this time of the year, the odds are really good that, hey, you're sitting there in wintertime, flu is really rampant. That would be the first guess by most people. And it's a good guess, but in this case, it was wrong.
So bottom line, what can we do to make sure something like this doesn't happen to a loved one?
The biggest thing is when you're looking at feminine hygiene of that nature is understanding that the environment down there, you have to use as natural as possible cottons that are unbleached, unprocessed, and there are companies that make those things. If they have synthetics in there, it presents an environment for things to grow on very easily. If you use a plastic applicator, you'll see with a lot of the tampons that are out there, they can scratch that lining on the way in. If you scratch the lining and you have a big bacterial infection, you now have a doorway for something to get into the bloodstream in a hurry and cause a problem. So try to go as natural as possible.
Okay, so read labels. And then what is the treatment course for toxic shock?
In this case, they're going to have to actually kill it off. So when you're looking at a staphylococcus aureus is what they're looking at. They'll use an antibiotic, most likely. Hydration is a good one. And then from a natural standpoint, you want to try and put things in that bump that immune system up. Antifungals, antibacterials, probiotics, things that really help the body fight back. And they should have a good outcome.
Okay, sounds good. Dr. McCaffrey, as always, thanks so much for being here.
You.
Still to come on March